The American ideal, then, of sexuality appears to be rooted in the American ideal of masculinity. This ideal has created cowboys and Indians, good guys and bad guys, punks and studs, tough guys and softies, butch and faggot, black and white. It is an ideal so paralytically infantile that it is virtually forbidden as an unpatriotic act, that the American boy evolve into the complexity of manhood. That is a quote taken from James Baldwin's The Price of the Ticket. And I feel like it perfectly captures what we're here to do. So without further ado, my name is Samantha and Remoy.
My name is Remoy Phillip.
And this is Masculinity. This is an opportunity for us to talk about masculinity and patriarchy by that token, and how that's affected not only women, but men from men themselves, and by that token, our society.
Real talk, if this is a masculinity podcast, and I'm a masculine dude, then why is there a cis female here leading the podcast?
Cis woman.
Shots fired.
Cis woman.
Shots fired.
Shots fired. Shots fired indeed. So yes, that's a good question. That's a good question. And people have asked me that question before. So I come to you talking about this topic as a concerned citizen. There's a lot of bullshit going on right now. There's a lot of violence. But most specifically, this is really an opportunity for us to open up the conversation about the way that masculinity affects men. And I am here because I want to know. I'm here because the conversation has to be had. And I feel like we're here trying to open up something that is existing and has been tackled, but hasn't really been tackled at a level where it's a household conversation. And this needs to be a household conversation because families and households and everything outside of that are what dictates our society. And we really just need to talk about it and have it not be like a subject that stays under the surface until, you know, people are old and then looking back on all the shit they wish they hadn't done if they had been more expressed and more understood.
I think the statistic is like 2 out of 5 women, which I think is outlandish. I think it's more like 4 out of 5 women have been like sexually abused, or there's been sexual violence predicated upon a woman. And that's ridiculous. And there's been a lot of work done in gender studies specific to women or even the LGBTQ community, but there's nothing really about the men's gender and what's going on there. And for any sort of like progress to be made, it can't just be men standing up and being like, we support women, and then just blending into the background like there's nothing else that they're responsible for. Conversation needs to happen. Discourse needs to happen. We need to call ourselves on our shit and start working towards making this a better society for all of us, if we really believe in equality. So that's why I'm here, and that's what I hope to be a part of, is this conversation. But also, we can't just blame everything on dudes. If you have a penis between your legs, everything's not your fault. But speaking back to like what James Baldwin said, right? Like, it wasn't just about binary. Like, the complexities of manhood, of being an American male, or just being a man in this world, it's complex, and there's real issues, and there's real things to talk about and to get at the bottom of. And not to say that everything is black or white, but to just be comfortable with the discussion.
And I think, to add to what you're saying as well, it's definitely nurture versus nature. I think that the conversation that we've... Oh, for sure. Oh, you disagree?
I think it can be equal parts both, but sure.
I mean, here's the thing. The way that I feel about the situation is like really separating masculinity as a persona versus something that people are born with. This is definitely something... I feel like the persona of masculinity is something that has been created. It's a construct that we have been subscribing to since the beginning of... I mean, we're both... Civilization, you know? And so I think it's important to recognize... I mean, we're at a point where we really need to recognize that we have something to say about this. This is not something that we have to do. We've just been doing it for so long that we think that we do.
Well, yeah, we've noticed that things are wrong. We know that sexual violence or physical violence, even emotional violence, is wrong. But by just kind of sweeping it under the rug and just talking about it every so often, we're saying that's enough. But that's not enough. Like,
it's not.
Like, we can't just talk about it once and be like, oh, we've covered our bases. No, it's like really time to... If we're going to talk about ourselves and be real with ourselves and acknowledge that there's a problem and have conversations about that, then it's time to start having the conversation about what's the solution to this problem. So I think, like, we're going to try to have seasons and episodes, and not necessarily like each episode's dedicated to a topic to then move on, but just to break it down and make it a little bit more like digestible. We'll have episodes, and so like what kind of episodes are you thinking here?
So we are going to talk about everything from education to sports to marriage to relationships to immigration, but a couple of quick topics that we just want to, bring up specifically are, for example, single-sex education. Did you know about single-sex education, Remoy?
I don't know what that is.
Single-sex education argues, or it comes from a school of thought that argues that boys benefit from having teachers who are essentially more, like, speak more loudly toward them, have a more confrontational, more, more rambunctious style of teaching, if you will, and that they benefit, and that boys benefit from, moving around a lot and like having conversations that are like loud and impassioned, whereas women or girls benefit from having nurturing and compassionate education where they talk about things. And the fact that girls are in an environment where there are only other girls, it encourages them to be able to speak up, because as soon as they get out in the real world, they'll be able to speak up for themselves, because they'll only be around women. There won't ever be boys, which is the reason why we need single-sex education.
Like, what about school dances?
We'll be talking about that during that episode. That's a really good question.
That's all I want to know about.
Oh, my God. Ridiculous. So another thing we're going to be talking about is infidelity and income. That's going to be more in our relationships, marriage, whatever bracket of things. Talking about the relationship between people making more money than their spouse and how that affects how they cheat on their spouse. It's going to be a very interesting conversation.
All I want to say is, like, yeah, I'm a woke feminist, but I'm also broke feminist, so I'm cool with this. Like, whatever. I'm okay with you paying the bills.
Okay,
Please.
That's great. We're also going to be having an episode about woke feminists, so Remoy can talk to you a little bit more about that, okay?
Hashtag woke and broke.
Oh, my God. I'm also woke and broke, actually. Anyway, so our final little thing that we wanted to just kind of bring up so that you guys could have a little, teaser as to what we'd be talking about is sports, athletes, specifically college athletes and professional athletes who get up on all kinds of platforms and say all kinds of ridiculous things and do all kinds of shit to their spouse and partners.
I mean, I think this is important because, A, I want to talk about Steph Curry all the time, or my man D. Wade. But this topic isn't something that's kind of reserved for the academic classroom, right? Like, this is something we encounter with every day, whether it's TV, whether it's movie, whether it is sports. Like, this intersects with our lives daily, and we can go about it every day and choose to ignore it or not even consider it. Or, once we start having these discussions about athletes and what that means for masculinity, then we're aware of it. And then we can really encourage the conversation more. So that's why that's so important. That's
right. And I think one thing that for me really comes up in this conversation is just accountability, not only of people of those men athletes, but also of the people who take advantage of that position, right? Like the men athletes and the people who are with them. I'm talking about the wifeys and the girlfriends and the groupies. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that too. This isn't all about, we're not just gonna talk about. We're gonna talk about masculinity and its effects. So stay tuned.
Yeah, women, you're gonna be held responsible too.
Oh my God, well, it's about to get real up in here.
So I think that's how this show will go. Maybe we'll have incredibly smart people from the field of masculine studies.
That's right.
Hopefully. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we'll just have like real muscly bros in here with their hats turned backwards, and we'll really talk about what it means to be masculine.
Just want to mention that Remoy's hat is currently turned backwards.
Shut up. Or maybe we'll get you who are listening to come in and just chat and talk about what everyday masculinity looks like, and we can really like hash it out and chop it up about the goods, the bads, the pros, the cons, or just lay it out all on the line.
Yeah. And I think that it'll be great to start to listen more and more about how people identify with this conversation or not. Maybe people will just come up in here and yell at us about how we're stupid for having the show. And that's fine too, as long as it's out in the world for people to hear and to see.
No,
So.
I think it's really important to listen. Like, I mean, we're not just here to talk. It's cool, like, that this conversation gets us started and we get to be a part of it, but we're here to listen.
So thank you for listening. This is Samantha and Zessie.
This is Remoy Phillip.
And this is Masculinity. Stay tuned.